Hello, this is Dan Nowman Nice Wonder, and you are watching the Nowman Show. And today on the show, we're continuing a discussion that really began in season one back in 2015, a subject of worker-owned cooperatives. And Richard Wolff is I would say, a mentor. He's a professor of economics, and that's when I first learned about worker co-ops when he came to Hollywood to speak in 2014. And so I've covered the subject practically every year since then. So we have more updates for 2021, and I have two great guests with me that will definitely be able to fill us in on what is happening here in the Los Angeles area and beyond. So welcome, Liz and Patrick. First, introduce yourselves, if you would, starting with Liz. Ryder. A little bit of background and what's going on now, and we can elaborate on that.
Well, over the course of 3 decades, I worked for organized labor. And so my involvement with the worker cooperative community has been focused around building connections between the labor movement and the worker cooperative community. I helped found the Union Co-op Council of the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, which has been in existence since 2007. And then, with that motto of, think globally, but act locally, I went on to found the Los Angeles Union Cooperative Initiative, which works on connecting the labor community in the county of Los Angeles. I also founded WORCS, Worker Ownership Resources and Cooperative Services, and I'm working with Patrick Conlon to develop that nonprofit. We also have a study group where we're working with a group of people that we would like to become the founding cohort for an Arizmendi style bakery in Los Angeles.
Arizmendi, right here.
Arizmendi.
Yeah. And we'll get into that more as well, even a little bit of that background. Next, Patrick Conlon.
Yeah, hi, my name is Patrick. I'm the Director of Development of WORCS, Worker Ownership Resources and Cooperative Services. My background is I've owned a few businesses over the past decade, and ever since I've been organizing cooperatives, for about 5 years, and I've helped different communities such as Santa Ana, introduced a lot of ideas for them that inspired like changing ordinances, as well as being an actual concept or an actual idea that could help transform their community. I'm helping reorganize WORCS, with Liz Ryder, and we're starting to rebuild different chapters, in Las Vegas. We have another cohort that may form in Colorado, and as well as the Sacramento area.
Fantastic.
And San Diego.
And yeah, we do have we have a few people in San Diego. We got to build that one. We have interested people. We just haven't formed one yet. So.
That's fantastic. Well, for those of you that, some of you watching will know what a worker cooperative is, but others will not. So I'm going to give a little bit of a short overview of what they are and how to distinguish worker-owned cooperatives from other types of cooperatives. And then we'll go into more detail on specifically what Liz and Patrick are talking about and what they're working on right now in 2021 going forward. A worker cooperative is also called a cooperative or a co-op, or Professor Richard Wolff, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, one of my mentors, he also refers them to as worker self-directed enterprises. And the reason why that kind of terminology is used is to distinguish them between different types of co-ops. And there are member co-ops. I mean, if you've ever been in an REI store, that's a member co-op. There's food co-ops. There's agricultural co-ops. Different corporations that you're all familiar with, like Sunkist or Dole, that might participate in sharing resources. That's not worker owned. It's still the basic top-down structure for the most part. The worker self-directed enterprise basically means that the workers are the owners. So whether it's a small enterprise or a large enterprise, it's one person, one vote. And not only do you do your regular job, whether that's in a store or a bank or university or IT department or whatever it is, you also are a worker owner where you have a voice in making, helping to make the most important decisions. For instance, such as what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits. That's what distinguishes it and makes it interesting for people because it's a new way of living your life where you actually have democracy in your workplace. I mean, as Richard Wolff says, you spend most of your life there. Why wouldn't you want democracy in the workplace? You know, so that's in a nutshell. That's what it is. And of course, Liz, Patrick, you can chime in as well.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that because, coming from a labor background, there's a very important distinction about the worker cooperative as compared to all other types of cooperatives. First of all the other types of cooperatives can be, when it comes to labor issues, can be just as complex and problematic as any corporation. But it's only the worker cooperative that solves the labor, what I call the labor problem, which is the fact that in the worker cooperative is when you return ownership of the means of production to the workers. So the workers own all the equipment, the workers own the business, nobody else, no other investors in it, just the workers own this thing. It's usually financed through debt financing rather through investments, so that the workers can keep control of ownership as well as control of the operation in the daily fashion. So this is the way that we change from having an exploitative relationship between employer and employee, which is why we have labor unions, to a non-exploitative relationship where the workers are the owners and the employer and the management and everything else. So it's a very important distinction that returning the means of production to the worker, and that worker cooperatives have 100% workplace democracy. The objective of the labor movement is to create greater workplace democracy, and worker cooperatives have it 100%. So it is the final solution. It is the objective of the labor movement is to have an economy based on worker cooperatives.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for that clarification. Patrick, do you have anything to add to the basics of worker cooperatives and what they are? Something else that you might want to add?
I'll just chime in. They get rid of the employee-employer relationship. Like for instance, if you work $15 an hour, the only reason why you're working $15 an hour is because you produce $15 an hour or more, and extra that you produce, goes to the employer. Where in a work co-op, what happens is it goes into a bank account, which all the workers at the end of the week or month or whatever it is, depending on how they're structured or what they do, they all decide on where the surpluses of what they produce, instead of having it appropriated and distributed by another class of people. Whether it's a small business and it's a business owner, or a big business where it's a management structure, the CEO that's accountable to a board of directors that make those decisions. So
yeah, exactly. And if your product was, let's say, what could be a toxic technology, maybe you want to have something more environmental friendly, you would actually have a voice in that, in making that decision, rather than having to have a product that could be bad for the water supply, bad for the food, whatever it is.
I'd like to chime in on that one too, if you allow me.
Sure, absolutely.
This is a very important point, because when you're really serious about being an environmentalist, you realize that the small adjustments we as individuals make, like carrying a canvas shopping bag or recycling our plastic bottles, will have relatively small impact on our ability to change the devastating destruction of the climate, of the environment. We have to change the way we do business. Okay, we have to change the way that industry is run, the way that we the way that we consume also, but more importantly, we have to change the way we do business. And so that's why worker cooperatives are such an important part of and tool. It should be a tool, although environmentalists for the most part don't even know about the structure. But this is what we need to change in order to change the problems with the environment. So Yeah, it's very much tied to the environmental movement.
And thank you for elaborating on that, because that's a very important point to, because it's part of the basics. It is literally part of the basics, let alone the details.
Yeah, I'll add something to that. The terminology I like to use for that is the subordination of capital. So, I like to use the example of like a paper mill. A paper mill is famous for, creating toxic waste, and pretty much they were famous, in the 70s and beforehand, of dumping a lot of that toxic waste, in the rivers and supplies before the EPA was, created. And I mean, think of the dynamic. Now, if you are a class of ownership and you may or may not live in the area, and if you do live in the area, you have enough money to leave the area, not a problem, and still run your factory. If the workers were their own board of directors and they were the ones, deciding on, should we dump this in the river, or should we, dispose of this in a, ethical, or, at least environmentally friendly way, they have their stakeholders. So what happens is, sure, let's say they do decide to dump it in the river. Well, guess what? Their neighbor is drinking, their neighbors are drinking the same water that you dumped the water in, and it's affecting and you as well, drinking the same water you're destroying. So it's like, it's a system of, sure, you can make go make the wrong decision collectively, but you also have to live with your decisions. Where the problem is with the current structure is they necessarily don't, because if you look at how a lot of businesses are structured, especially like corporate capitalism, the owners could live all over the world. They can live in Kansas, they can live in China, they can live in Russia, or somewhere in Africa, or wherever. And do you think they really are going to live with the consequences of, a decision of that matter? Probably not. And the only thing they would only have to worry about maybe a lawsuit if it whenever were to come.
That's absolutely correct.
This has also raised its head with the pandemic, because not having control of your work environment has resulted in people not getting appropriate, PPEs, equipment, or not handling, their change in the dynamics of their employment in a way which is, favorable to the worker, because we don't own and control the workplaces. Some investor is what's being answered to, rather than the worker. So again, is the health crisis, and yet worker cooperatives are one of the really important solutions to the problems that have been highlighted by the fact that we do not own our own economy.
Absolutely. That's brilliant.
Their business objectives are different too. So that's another thing I want to actually, so sure, we can subordinate, you can subordinate capital. In a traditional business, your business objective is to maximize profit or to maximize shareholder equity. Where in a worker cooperative, it's to maximize member benefits, which could mean a lot of things. It could mean getting healthcare, higher wages, not destroying the environment you live in, because that's a member benefit. So there is a different way of like thinking about it, or what the objectives are, that can stick, opposed to maximum ROI on an investment. So
it would also end the extreme inequality, big time, like from economic to social to racial, gender, everything. I mean, there's not a downside, in other words, that I can see with worker cooperative and a cooperative economy. And we are moving into a new era. I think we're coming into a transition point. Next, Liz, give us a little bit more information specifically about what's happening now in 2021 and what you're involved in.
Well, we have the primary thing that I'm involved in, this month, is that we are the Los Angeles Union Cooperative Initiative. Will be giving a presentation to the LA County Fed. Now, for people that don't know, or that have not been a member of a union, they may not know what that means. But there is, the organization which everybody's familiar with is called the AFL-CIO, is a federation of unions. And it's a federation of unions at the national level, but also the state and local level. So within the Los Angeles County, there are, maybe close to 300 union locals in Los Angeles County, and they come together in the county Fed, the Federation of Labor, and they have monthly meetings, which is called the delegates meeting. The only way to get into those meetings is you have to be an elected officer or a delegate from a labor union to be part of that. And that's where they discuss issues they have in common. So common campaigns, but also, of course, they'll review the political landscape and how it impacts unions and workers' rights. And we have been allowed access to present at the delegates meeting. So we'll be presenting to, close to 300 local labor unions to offer them education about worker cooperatives as a solution for the labor movement. So the labor movement has been, of course, declining in membership because the landscape of labor changes over time. So, at one time, everybody worked for, a big industrial corporation like United Auto Workers, working for the auto industry. But those jobs have been, declining as industry gets sent overseas. And now we're moving into things where we have workers that are more on temporary and part-time basis. More often they're working in the gig economy, and the landscape of work keeps changing. And so that original model for labor unions has been slightly, declining slowly over time. So we have to think of new strategies, which in worker cooperatives are actually not a new strategy, but we have to think of alternative strategies and bring them to the forefront to deal with a different sort of environmental, economic landscape, the landscape of work. And the other thing that's happening in Los Angeles is that or around the world, around the country, is that the baby boomers are retiring. So in the literature now, they're calling this the silver tsunami. There's going to be, in the next few years, Los Angeles has identified about 10,000 businesses in the city of Los Angeles that will change hands because baby boomers are retiring. Now, the city of Los Angeles wants to retain those businesses as local ownership, and unions want to retain the ones they represent as union members. So if they're bought by corporations that they're not local, that are, private equity firms or something like that, that's going to be extremely problematic for labor unions. So we're presenting to the county Fed about worker ownership as a solution. So as these businesses change hands, the workers buy them collectively and own them collectively and run them democratically, and they become worker cooperatives and return the means of production to the workers.
Exactly. And so in LA, there's a project called Downtown Crenshaw. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Okay, well, the Downtown Crenshaw project is about cooperative housing mostly. What's happening is that there's a iconic mall in South Central Los Angeles called the Crenshaw Mall. And there's several private equity firms that have been trying to purchase that. And what they want to do is they want to transform it into high-end, very expensive housing, high-end housing for Los Angeles. This is, the process of gentrification. So in South Central, the African-American community is probably one of the largest African-American communities in, this part of the country, but it's dwindling because of gentrification. And so the community has grabbed onto this particular situation with the Crenshaw Mall is extremely symbolic. And they are attempting to raise the funds and the financing they've actually put in a bid. And they've confronted several private equity firms, the CIM group, which is somehow connected to the Kushner group, has its ties to the Trump administration. And then after that, an organization called Live Work, which also has ties to the Kushner group. So they have organized community organizing to resist this buyout by this private equity firm and the transformation of this housing into high-end housing, expensive housing, and they want to purchase it and remodel it so that they have affordable housing. So it's mostly about cooperative housing, but I did want to talk about cooperative housing in general as key, not just cooperative housing, but cooperative ownership of a commercial real estate as well as key to this movement. The workers that work in worker cooperatives have to be able to afford to live near the worker cooperative. So the cooperative housing is extremely important. And then the commercial spaces, I believe that every time a worker cooperative sets up a business plan, that they should have in their business plan a plan to purchase the facility which will be their workplace. So cooperative ownership of the land is key to the success of the movement, of the worker cooperative movement. So the worker cooperative will be in the first floor of downtown Crenshaw. The community organization downtown Crenshaw has asked us to help out by developing worker cooperatives. It will be on the first floor, but the upper two floors are going to be converted to affordable housing if they manage to purchase this mall, which is, you should go to downtowncrenshaw.com and /petition, sign the petition, because this is how we've been working to fend off these big investment private equity firms that have been attempting to gentrify South Central and push out the African American community.
I will definitely put that in the closing credits as well as and other sources too, where you can see that and get that. Thank you so much. And Patrick, we can finish out the episode here. Give us just the basic overview of what you're doing. We will have a part 2, by the way. So to give us an overview of what you're working on right now in 2021 going forward.
Sure. I just want to actually add to Liz, housing cooperatives are a big part of it, because what's the point of having a higher wage at a worker co-op if getting $30 an hour if the neighborhood goes up and you need $50 an hour in order to survive there. So housing cooperatives are key for this strategy. Okay, so what I'm working on is, I launched about a week ago Shop Co-op. Shop Co-op is an e-commerce site that only sells items that are produced by worker cooperatives. There's nothing like it in America, and I don't think there's anything like it around the world, though there are people developing these sites in Argentina, Australia, and England, from people I've talked to in the cooperative community. The point of this is to, it's hard to find cooperatives, to support them, because there's not a lot. There's only about 500 cooperatives, worker cooperatives in the United States. So most people, if they wanted to support a worker cooperative, can't support a worker cooperative. And if they want to shop online, they have to go through a massive dig. And the reason why I created it was because I had this same frustration last summer. And so now, so we only have a few items right now, but by summertime, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, we're going to be purchasing inventory and having a lot more options for people to support worker cooperatives. And also the goal really is, to turn this into a worker cooperative itself, and then the surpluses of this organization will go towards WORCS to contribute to the capital fund of WORCS, so we can start getting more projects off the ground for WORCS. Just because one of the biggest problems for worker cooperatives is to raise, to get capital in order to start or to expand, in essence.
And what's the website for WORCS?
WORCS is worcsusa.org.
And it's basically, that's to raise capital for co-ops.
You're talking Shop Co-op. So Shop Co-op is shopcoop.coop.
Shopcoop.coop.
Yeah, Shop Co-op.
WORCS is, what is WORCS? Give us a little more information about WORCS.
WORCS is a worker cooperative developer. So not only do we educate and incubate worker cooperatives, we want to make sure we're, helping them all the way to the lease signing, or, them opening up their business. Whether they need legal help, we find legal experts for them. We find, places where they can raise capital if they have capital requirements they need in order to get off the ground. Things like that. We make sure they don't hit any walls, and anyone having a cooperative enterprise or some kind of development. And we also we form worker boards. So that's the key, is we are based in organizing. So we feel like our step one, or if someone wants to start a co-op, we qualify it really to see whether this group of workers are willing and able to form a board of directors and meet on a regular basis to collectively make decisions.
So there's 3 different ways in order to create worker cooperatives. The first one is incubation. So an entrepreneur, let's say, or some person has a great idea, and you assist them. They are the project manager. They take the ball and they roll with it. The second methodology is conversions from already existing companies. So a company already exists. Let's say the owner wants to retire or just go on to something else. Organizing how the workers can form a board and buy out the business is a conversion model. The third model is what's called development. Development is when the development group, which is a group like ours, decides what type of business they're going to develop, Then they, go out, get the lease for the building, write the business plan, all those sorts of things. And then they finally pull together a group. They go out and recruit people from various ways to become the initial cohort, and they train them on how to run a worker cooperative and a business, and open up the doors, and then that becomes their business. So there's essentially three different models. We will be doing all three of them at various times, including conversions. But we've done actually several projects in Los Angeles. Interestingly, the three projects that we worked on in Los Angeles thus far, none of them are still in business. So we are taking it very carefully this time and making sure that the training is done in a satisfactory way and that people are set up for success.
Yeah, and a lot of it's rooted in creating the worker boards too, and then doing this properly. So, for sure. And okay, so other projects, so we have Mutuals, which is going to open next month in Nevada City, which is between Sacramento and where the Donner Party, famously had their episode. And that is going to be a worker self-directed enterprise, a nonprofit thrift operation where the workers are their own board of directors. And the point is to raise surplus or capital for more worker cooperatives. So that's one project we're doing, and we have a cohort up there that's doing that. We have a group in Nevada, Las Vegas, that wants to start a worker cooperative bookstore, an online operation, and a mobile operation. And I have about 5 people still working on that, and they're starting to form a board. And also there's a Spark in Santa Ana, and they've changed laws and things like that. And I'm working with community groups to start getting things off the ground. And we also have a micro donation fund. So this micro donation fund, it's about 50 people so far. It's been around for maybe 3-4 months. And to contribute like, $5, $10, $15, $20 a month. And what that does is that's going to help us raise capital for worker cooperatives. Once we get like, 100 or 200, maybe 500 people contributing, and, to be more substantial. And it also will help us pay for trainings. Instead of paying like $100, $150 for a professional trainer for certain, cooperatives and things like that, everyone pitches in and makes it affordable for everybody if everyone gets on it. And it's going to allow us to collateralize the money so we can get bigger loans and also microfinancing. So if an existing cooperative needs a loan, we can give them like a 5, 10, 15 grand loan, if they want to do a capital expenditure on some piece of equipment or whatever they need. So.
Well, thank you so much. We've run out of time for this episode, but we're going to continue the conversation. And when part 2 happens, we're going to talk about Arizmendi Bakery, and also coming to Los Angeles, we're going to talk about the Democratic Socialists of America, Los Angeles involvement in that. We're also going to talk about another project that Liz has, and we'll see some of her presentation to introduce this idea to unions in the Los Angeles area. This is Nice Wander. Thank you so much, Patrick Conlon and Liz Ryder. And stay tuned for part 2 when that happens, and we'll go into more detail. And until that time, stay present in the moment, always.